Okay, so let's get started. Welcome everyone to the May meeting. Nice sunny day, so that might be why our numbers are a little fewer than normal. Next slide. Oh, do you have the flicker? All right. Okay, so RASC Halifax Centre respectfully acknowledges that we live and observe on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And the RASC believes in and practices inclusivity and diversity. Halifax Centre welcomes all with an interest in astronomy without prejudice. So, today's meeting, which remind everyone, is a public meeting. So hello to anyone that's new to the group, attending this meeting for the first time. After the photo montage, we'll have our keynote presentation by Chris Gainor, and then a social break, and then some discussion about outreach, news from the board from Judy Black, and finally, what's up in the May sky. Okay. So these are some of the images taken by Halifax Centre members through the month of April, which wasn't a great month for imaging, but had a few clear nights. So first image up is Jerry Black's image of the comet C2025R3 pan-stars, taken with the S30 Pro from Blomidon, right, Jerry? At 3 in the morning. Well, you got up at 2 in the morning to drive there with Peter.
Right. But it worked.
It worked, yeah. Good shot. And a Lyrid meteor caught by Jerry.
Apparently that's wrong.
Oh, wrong.
It's a satellite.
Oh. Okay, well, our mistake.
Looks good.
Yeah, although, yeah, I can see why you might have thought it was a meteor. Okay, and the Cigar Galaxy, Messier 82, also from Jerry and his S30 Pro. And how many images in this one stacked? Hundreds?
4 hours maybe.
Okay, so 4 hours worth of 30 or 60 second imaging? 60 second imaging, and pretty impressive for a little 30 millimeter aperture. You can really see the star blast effect there. And Barkarian's Gene from Jerry, again with his S30 Pro.
Seems to be the major contributor.
And this is a collaboration between Jerry Black and Peter Hurley, Horsehead and Flame Nebulae, taken with their S30 Pros at SCO. And Michael Bouchat, Waning Gibbous Moon from April 9th. Another one from Michael, the Sun on April 12th in hydrogen alpha, and some nice prominences visible. And another one for Michael, Venus and the Seven Sisters, SC45 from his window, and it looks like he got a satellite in there too. Jeff Donaldson, this southeastern part of Mare Imbrium with Copernicus front and center. And the Whirlpool Galaxy, A51A from Jeff, and this image is currently at 32 hours of integration time. So this is a multi-year project by Jeff Donaldson. And he still has to add, this is an RGB L image. He still has to add hydrogen alpha data to it. And Jeff's comment right here. Lisa Ann Fanning took this image of the waning gibbous moon on April 4th. And Paul Gray, continuing our theme of Markarian's chain, this is the eyes in the chain, two galaxies that are interacting, NGC 4435 and 4438. And there's lots of other small galaxies visible in the background in this image too. A nice spiral galaxy from Paul Gray. This one is in Leo. So Paul had a couple of really nice clear nights in Greenwood. This is a solar prominence that I imaged on the 18th of April. Some sunspots from the 26th of April. And the splinter galaxy, NGC 5907. And last, Messier 47, which is here. And another open star cluster, NGC 2423, which is up here. And this is with the S30 Pro. This is Mizar and Alcor from Frank Logan, and this is neat because you can see that from the spikes, there's actually two stars here. So that's Mizar A and B, and there's Alcor. Blair McDonald's Markarian chain. And here's the eyes that you saw earlier in Paul's image, and lots of other galaxies scattered around in this image. You can have some fun counting them up. David McMullen with his Door 3. This is Messier 3 in Canis Venetini. And now I have a series of images from Kathy Walker, Messier 92 in Hercules. The Spindle Galaxy, Messier 102. NGC 5005, so another galaxy in Canis Venetisi. And another globular star cluster, NGC 6229 in Hercules. So this is kind of this is the third globular star cluster in the constellation Hercules after M13 and M92. And lastly, a little nebula, NGC 7008,
That's a neat one.
known as the Fetus Nebula. And that's pretty neat because you can kind of see the outline in the center. It does look like a fetus. And that's it for images from the group last month. So now we'll move on to our keynote presentation, and Judy Black is going to do the introductions.
All right. It gives me a great honor to introduce our guest speaker today. I've known Chris for several years. Met him initially, you may not remember, but we met initially at one of the GAs way back when. But I've certainly been more involved with him in my role in National Council. He's been a longtime member of the RASC, and in fact, he was its president from 2018 to 2020. He is an historian, and he specializes in space exploration. He's written 6 books. One of them is this one. He started writing books beginning with this particular topic, with the Avro Canada. I have one here, Not Yet Imagined, and it's the one about Hubble, and that's his most recent book. If you get any of his books, they really are a good read. Very well done. So without further ado, I will leave you in the hands of Chris. So welcome, Chris.
Okay, well, it's great to see my friend Judy and a few others like Alan Dyer and uh, Peter Jedicke and perhaps a few more. And I was just
Here's the deal on the big screen.
We don't see your screen yet.
I was just thinking about uh, I actually got a bit of a reminder of my last visit out to Nova Scotia, which was for the 2015 GA. I sure miss those days when we had in-person GAs, and um, and I hope we can get back to them. On that trip, I had a little adventure, which I was reminded of this morning by uh, somebody, um, and as that GA, as a lot of them were, took place around the Canada Day weekend, and so I was at the GA, and then I went and visited a friend of mine in Antigonish, um, and he was in a pipe band that was playing on Canada Day in Pugwash. So so I happily joined him on that trip, and of course discovered there that Yuri Gagarin had visited Pugwash, and that eventually turned into an article which I put into the RASC journal, and not only that, our very good friend Mary Lou Whitehorn had witnessed that visit. She had been in the airport, the Halifax airport, when Yuri Gagarin arrived back in 1961. And of course, we were all a lot younger then. But this trip this talk kind of starts from uh, another a trip I took, uh, and at the at I'm of course old enough to remember the Apollo flights to the moon. And at that time, some of our Canadian media did did cover the Canadians who were involved in Apollo. Um, uh, Anybody from that time probably remembers seeing the Weekend magazine and the Canadian magazine, which appeared in various newspapers on Saturdays, and they both had articles about these people, and there was some other media coverage as well. And then that was kind of forgotten, and in 1994, the National Space Society in the United States, which is made up of spaceflight enthusiasts, held their first conference outside the U.S. And it took place in Toronto at the old Regal Constellation Hotel out near the airport, which sadly is gone now. And I had to go to. I can't even remember why I was going to Toronto, but I was going there and heard about this meeting, and it sounded like a lot of fun. You know, people like Buzz Aldrin and were going to be there, so I signed up for it, and uh, discovered that there was a reunion of these Canadians who worked on uh, the uh, Apollo program. So and they were just given a room and they were just sitting around reminiscing for the whole weekend. And so I wound up spending a lot of time with them and then decided this would be what turned into my first book, which I will be talking about now. And I'm going to be starting off just briefly talking about the story of Avro Canada. Of course, that's a matter of great interest, and I still get actually requests to talk just about the Avro Arrow. And in fact, I subsequently wrote a book just concentrating on the Arrow. But it just kind of quickly, that story began during World War II when uh, C.D. Howe, the great minister of everything in our wartime government, uh, set up a number of firms to make armaments. We were one of the almost like the arsenal of democracy in a sense during that war, and one of the one of those places was a thing called Victory Aircraft, which was set up in Malton, Ontario, right next to the Toronto airport, today Pearson Airport. And they were turning out Lancasters, and when the war ended, they wanted to keep people going. So the government made a deal with the Hawker Siddeley Group in the UK to set up an outfit called Avro Canada, and they had one kind of successful aircraft, the CF 100, I believe it was, and they made it was actually a jet aircraft, but subsonic. Although it turned out it was capable of flying at supersonic speeds, but it was basically designed to be subsonic. It was our first jet interceptor, and they made about 700 of those. And then they also made a passenger aircraft called the jetliner, but they only made one of them, and that's kind of a sad story because it. If it had been allowed to go into production, we might have had an even bigger aircraft industry than we did have. In the early 50s, Avro started to work at the urging of the RCAF on building this plane here, the CF-105 Avro Arrow, which was capable of flying at twice the speed of sound to intercept against Soviet bombers. And this story isn't very happy either. They started to build them, and there was a number of changes in the program, and I'm not going to get into everything, but it was becoming very, very, very expensive. It was also a world-leading aircraft, and but the fates were kind of against it. So this photograph, you can take note of the date, and that date might be familiar to a lot of us, although not for this reason. This was what you're seeing here is the day that the first arrow was rolled out of the out of the Avro plant in anticipation of its test flights, and it was the first Friday in October of 1957. There were all sorts of dignitaries there, and so the plane was rolled out, and then you have the scene where this picture was taken, and everybody afterwards, or at least a lot of the people who were there, then went home, or they went to some parties that were going on at various Avro facilities to celebrate this milestone. And they switched on their radios. TV was just starting, but usually you got your news from the radio. And um, and this was what they were talking about on the radio. That very same day, on the other side of the earth, the Soviet Union had launched Sputnik, and this this was one of the harbingers, I guess, of the fate that awaited the Avro Arrow. See, the Arrow was designed to defend Canada, and also the United States for that matter, against bombers coming over the pole from the Soviet Union. But the launch of Sputnik was proof that the Russians had the ability to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles that could go anywhere and deliver nuclear weapons anywhere, which meant that the Avro Arrow was now at great expense defending us against a secondary threat. And there was a number of other things going on. The Army was quite concerned about the cost of the Arrow, and so was the Navy. They were worried that there would never be another new warship, and the Army no more tanks or anything like that. And the government, which by then was a conservative government headed by John Diefenbaker, was quite concerned about the costs. Even C.D. Howe, who was by then sitting in the opposition benches with the Liberals, had made it known that he was concerned about the costs and whether it was feasible to continue with the Arrow. So um, um, the Arrow was in some trouble. Now, when while they were developing the Arrow, they were using some of the top facilities available. This is the simulator of that they used for the Arrow, and it had I think it was an IBM 1040 computer, which you needed a very large room to contain it and the cooling equipment. And of course, it had, a tiny fraction of the power that we have in our iPhones today, or smartphones. But that was the best. That was the best that was going. And this is a photograph of that simulator. This was like one of the most powerful computers available in the world. And sitting in the cockpit, you can see a fellow named Jan Zarakovsky, who is the top test pilot at Avro, and he started flying the test flights. These are some of the people who were in charge of the Arrow program. At the left, there's a fellow named Bob Lindley. Next to him, sitting in the center, is a guy named Jim Floyd, who is in charge of all the engineering of the Arrow. And interestingly, he just died a few years ago at age 104. And then standing there is a fellow named Guest Hake, who is another top engineer, who I actually don't know very much about. But the fellow at the right is kind of key to this story. He's a fellow named Jim Chamberlain. And he he was the chief aerodynamicist, who had worked for a number of firms, I think, including in Nova Scotia for a time. He was born in Kamloops, but when his father died at Vimy Ridge, his mother moved back to her where she'd been raised in Toronto. So Chamberlain was raised in Toronto and then became this brilliant aircraft designer. But these are the people who are running the Aero program. Anyway, the Diefenbaker government in the summer of 1958 gave some warning that they were sort of winding back the Aero program, but hadn't quite decided on it. By then, Zurakovsky and some of the other people were flying test flights of the first 5 Aeros, and the 6th one was about to roll off the assembly line. And on February 20th, 1959, Diefenbaker stood up in the House of Commons and announced that the whole program was cancelled. And this had a lot of effects around the country because at that time, Avro Canada was one of the top 2 or 3 corporations in the country. It actually had a big effect in Nova Scotia because Avro, I think, there were some. It had a coal mining operation in Nova Scotia, which actually continued on for a number of years after that, and was subsidized by the government, and was eventually shut down, I think. And also, I think, was it Dominion Steel out in Nova Scotia, which is also part of the Avro empire. Anyway, this how Avro dealt with this was that as soon as Diefenbaker made that announcement, they just laid everybody off. Just they were just that day they were all told to go home, and Avro was wound down, and within a couple of years was basically gone, and the thousands of engineers from Avro were laid off. Some went into other Canadian aviation firms such as Canadair or de Havilland. Some went to various firms in the States. Some became independent engineers, doing all sorts of projects. My favorite group, which I've only kind of heard about this in general, but a bunch of them decided to become dentists. So they all went off to dental school. But they all had to find jobs. And I don't know if anybody has read books by a fellow named Ted Barris. He recently wrote a book about the Canadians involved in the Battle of Breton and things like that. He's a very popular author, and right now he is working on a book about the people of Avro. Unfortunately, since most of them are gone now, he can't interview many of them, but I'm helping him because I interviewed some of the people I'm going to be talking about. So keep an eye out for that. So So anyway, all these people were laid off, and there was a lot of discussion. Well, what can we do with them? And the government didn't uh, didn't do very much with them. There was some talk of basically lending some to the United States, uh, including to a new organization that had just been set up in the U.S. called NASA. You know, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which had been just started the previous year, or this or started in 1958, and we're now in 1959. That plan did not fall through, but NASA still needed some people because uh, the aerospace industry in the US was going great guns at the time, but a lot of people weren't that interested in the space program because they thought it might be just uh, kind of a one-off thing, or that they didn't think the prospects were that good. So some of the top people from NASA flew up to the Malton airport in I believe in March of 1959, and they interviewed a whole bunch of people from Avro, and eventually hired, um, or they at first they hired 25 of them, but um, they uh, they eventually, over the next few months, on top of the 25, they hired at least another 6 people, and some went to private industry. Bob Lindley at the left in this photo actually went to work for McDonnell Aircraft, um, and which built the Mercury and Gemini spacecraft, as well as they were quite involved in the uh, building jet aircraft. And Jim Chamberlain at the right was hired by NASA, and he was the most important member of the group that was hired from Avro. Now, Avro was tied into the Hawker Siddeley group in the United States, and a lot of engineers at Avro Canada had actually come over from the United States, or from the United Kingdom, uh, because the wartime austerity that they had over there, persisted well into the 1950s, and some people did not like aspects of life in the UK. There's still very much kind of a class system, and even in these aviation plants, they would have different dining rooms depending on where you were in the pecking order. So there's a lot of them. So out of the 30, I think um, uh, the 32 that were hired, 31 or 32 that were hired by NASA. Um, uh, I think actually, my memory serves me right. A little bit more than half of them were from the UK, and then uh, the others were from Canada, and there was one who actually originated in Poland. But uh, the uh, the Avro people were hired very, very quickly. Now, a lot of them, uh, some of them were hired for specific skills. Some of their computer experts were hired. Others with that test flight activity or experience were hired, and I'm going to be talking about some of the top people. But even in those days, the Americans had a lot of bureaucracy, attending immigration to the states. But when it suited them, that bureaucracy could disappear pretty fast. So in April of 1959, which is lightning speed, they were they had gone through the immigration formalities and reported to work at NASA. So when NASA was set up, they quickly set up the Mercury program, which was the first um, human spaceflight program to uh, uh, launch astronauts into space, and in that same April of 1959, they hired the the astronauts for that, the Mercury 7. And so a lot of the Avro folks and those 7 astronauts all reported to work at NASA on the same day, which was April 27th. Um, and so they all went through their induction uh, formalities, which are very familiar to anybody who's gone to work for the government. You know, you usually have to sit through talks about all the rules and spend a good chunk of the day filling out forms and things like that, and you know, learning where to work. Now, at that time, the Mercury program was run out of a place called the Langley Research Center, which is actually on the Atlantic coast of Virginia, out near Newport News, which of course is the big Navy town out there. And the predecessor to NASA, the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, had this lab there. So the Mercury people were starting work there. Now, if any of you ever saw that movie Hidden Figures, about the black women who were hired as computers to, you know, with their slide rules and things, actually doing the computing for these flights, they have a scene there which I just howl with laughter because it was concerns the day that the astronauts first reported to work, and that movie shows a big parade and them being welcomed. Well, there was nothing of the sort. There was no parade. It was just standard government in induction, and the Avro people were right with them, going through the same stuff. Um, the NASA group at Mercury was actually not very big, so everybody got to know each other quite well. So you're probably wondering about this photo here. So some of you will recognize the fellow at the right, and that's Gus Grissom, the one of the Mercury 7, and he flew on the second Mercury flight, which actually famously sank. The capsule sank in, and Grissom had to swim away and nearly drowned. And then he was the commander of the first Gemini flight a few years later, but unfortunately was killed in the Apollo fire in 1967. The fellow at the left is a guy named Peter Armitage, who is one of the Avro people. He was one of the Brits. But this is a picture of them in front of a Mercury capsule, which was actually used for the testing of the recovery. And after this is actually taken after Grissom had his near drowning experience, and they were working on systems to make sure that the subsequent Mercuries did not sink. But I have a couple of pictures here of the Avro people with the astronauts. Here's another one at the right here. This fellow with his hand on his chin is a guy named John Hodge, and another one of the Brits. But this is actually a meeting with some of the top figures in the Mercury program, actually preparing for Grissom's flight in 1961. That's Alan Shepard, the first American to go into space. John Glenn. There's Gus Grissom. And Deke Slayton, another one of the Mercury astronauts who actually had to wait a number of years to fly, and some of the other officials from Mercury. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Hodge in a minute, but one of the tasks that a lot of the British and Canadian people from Avro had to do was set up the first mission control center. There was a lot of discussion when Mercury started. Well, what do we do to keep in touch with the astronauts, and how much exercise do we control? And the person who was kind of in charge of that was a guy named Chris Kraft, and who was the very first flight director. He said, well, one thing we could do is that I could just sit there with a monitor with a red button and a green button, and if I push the red button, the whole mission is aborted. But they actually decided to set up a number of positions inside the Mission Control Center. And anybody who's seen Apollo 13, that movie, has got a pretty good idea of what the Mission Control was capable of doing. Some of the very early controllers came from the Avro group. And you can see in this photograph, this was the first control center, but it was actually at Cape Canaveral, not too far from the launch pad where some of the Mercury flights were launched. You can see the map on the wall, and a network of tracking stations was set up around the world. This, in terms of communications, we were still in a different world. When Mercury flew, there were still no communications satellites really as we know them today. And so they had to use telephone lines to communicate. And astronauts were dispatched to some of the control centers around the world. Like you can see a couple in Australia, and there was at least one of the astronauts was sent down there. This might have been for one of the later Mercury flights. The first the first flights were only, at least the first orbital flights were only three orbits, and you can see that they had these tracking stations under those early orbits, not so much under the later ones. But the Avro group had a lot to do with setting this up under Chris Kraft. Of course, this turned into starting in the Gemini program into the Mission Control Center in Houston, which was more sophisticated than the one out at the Cape. And this photograph was taken about half an hour before the oxygen tank explosion that on Apollo 13. You can see the fellow in the foreground is Gene Kranz, who is the famous flight director from Apollo 13. And you can see on the screen Fred Hayes from Apollo 13. They did a television broadcast just before all hell began to break loose. Mercury got going in 1961. This is Alan Shepard, just on a suborbital flight, and Gus Grissom also flew on his Mercury Redstone on a suborbital flight, but they had been beaten by Yuri Gagarin, and who I mentioned a few minutes ago, and interestingly enough, when the second flight of a Soviet took place, the Gagarin flew in April of 1961, and German Titov flew the following August. When German Titov blasted off, Yuri Gagarin was visiting Pugwash. So there's a little Nova Scotia angle for you. John Glenn followed in 1962 and became the first American to go into orbit and became a huge hero in the United States. He, of course, subsequently became a U.S. Senator and became the only one member of the Mercury 7 who flew on the shuttle many years later when he was 78. We'll get back to the Avro people. So, as I said, probably if there was a head to this group, it was probably this fellow here, Jim Chamberlain, who I showed you in an earlier slide. So, when Chamberlain showed up in Langley, he was basically made the head of engineering for Mercury, because the people who had designed Mercury had actually started to move on to other things. They were already starting to think about Apollo and what might come after Mercury. But Chamberlain had a lot of production experience from Avro and other firms in Canada. And that was what was needed at the time. They needed somebody to go and work with McDonnell Aircraft and start cranking out these capsules for the various flights. He was never that well known to the public like some of the other people at NASA, but he had a very responsible job. Now, one thing with his production experience, he hated the design of Mercury because a lot of the systems were just kind of piled on top of each other. And I will just hold that point, and I will, I can get to that now. So they once they got the people like John Glenn flying and things like that, they began to think, we need something to come after Mercury. So they started talking about building another spacecraft, which would have 2 astronauts. And Chamberlain was put in charge of it because he started with some designs that he thought were better than what they had on Mercury. Like I mentioned that they just had all these systems just kind of piled on top of each other. So when there was a problem on the launch pad with something, they would have to tear the whole spacecraft apart. And Chamberlain started to design the Gemini spacecraft, and you can see a model of a Gemini on this desk in front of him. but it was designed so that all the systems could be accessed easily if they needed to be serviced on the pad. Now, Gemini was made by McDonnell Aircraft just like Mercury was, and in some ways resembled Mercury, but it was actually quite a different spacecraft inside. But he was the fellow who was the designer of the Gemini spacecraft, and he was the first manager of the Gemini program. Although when they moved to operations, he was replaced. Um, uh, there were a number of problems with Gemini. Actually, a lot of them were not his fault, but he wound up carrying the can for him. And I actually spoke to his successor's manager, and he said, "Well, Jim was kind of the right person for getting the ball rolling on production and design and all this sort of stuff. But they needed somebody different to kind of handle the operations." Um, Jim Chamberlain died in 1980, so I never met him. Um, but he was very important, and in some of the highlights of the Gemini program, they flew 10 flights with 2-man crews, and Gemini was the time in 1965 to 1966 where the U.S. kind of took the lead in the space program from the Russians. So the Russians just barely beat the Americans to the first spacewalk, but this was the first American spacewalk, Ed White from Gemini. And then, by then, they were working on Apollo, and they knew they would need to rendezvous and dock with other spacecraft. And so this is the first rendezvous in space between two Gemini spacecraft, so you can get a sense of what the spacecraft look like. This is Gemini 7 is seen from Gemini 6. An important part of Gemini was that a lot of astronauts were trained and cut their teeth in Gemini, including a lot of the big names like Neil Armstrong and Frank Borman and Jim Lovell and all this. But perhaps even more important is that the controllers got a lot of experience in Gemini. And this is a photograph of the first 4 flight directors. It's a position that still exists today. And, during a mission, the flight director is basically the god of the mission. Like, they have full authority. They even have more authority over the mission than the President of the United States. So at the right in this photograph is Chris Kraft, who I mentioned before. He was the guy who kind of was the mastermind of all this, starting with Mercury and then Gemini and Apollo, and later, of course, became the director of the Johnson Space Center. And then in the middle is the second flight director, who is John Hodge from Avro. And then at the left, standing there, is a guy named Glyn Lunny, who is also not that well known, but he played a pretty crucial role in Apollo 11 and Apollo 13 and things like that. And then sitting at the left there is Gene Kranz, who was actually the third flight director, but he was by the time of Apollo 11 and Apollo 13, he was actually kind of the head of the flight directors, and was famous for a phrase he actually never uttered in reality, at least when he was supposed to have, but did in the movie. Failure is not an option. But anyway, a famous leader. But the the uh, the group at Langley had moved to Houston in 1962, and then the Space Center was built there and opened in time for Gemini. So this Chris Kraft was the flight director for all the Mercury missions, except for part of the last one, which John Hodge was the flight director for. And Hodge was when Kraft began to move into higher management, Hodge was made the chief flight director for the first time for a mission which actually had the first emergency in space, and that was Gemini 8, which and the crew of that flight was a fellow named Neil Armstrong, who you might have heard of, and Dave Scott, who also commanded Apollo flight later on. And Gemini 8 began to spin out of control, and the mission had to be cut short. But it was not a long, drawn out thing like Apollo 13. So actually, John Hodge presided over the first emergency in space, but Gene Kranz was also involved in that as well. Anyway, Hodge actually left the ranks of flight directors shortly after Apollo began. He was having some differences with Chris Kraft, but he went into like planning for future Apollo missions, and eventually worked in the space station program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of Apollo, and I'm sure you recognize Prince Philip there, and the fellow right next to the capsule who's kind of looking upwards is a guy named Owen Maynard from Sarnia, Ontario, and he became the highest ranking Canadian in the Apollo program. But in 1961, when President Kennedy announced or set the national goal to land astronauts on the moon before the end of the 1960s, NASA had to decide how they were going to go there. One of the options was to build a spacecraft like what you see in a 50s science fiction film that just blasts off, goes straight to the moon, backs onto the moon, astronauts go out, plant the flag, and then come back and fly back. That was the original idea, but it actually was not practical in a lot of ways. You would have to land all these systems on the moon that you don't need until another part of the mission, and it vastly increased the size of the rocket you needed to launch them in the first place, and the cost, and several things. And there was a fellow in another part of NASA named John Houbolt. He actually wasn't directly involved in Apollo, but he said, that idea doesn't make any sense. What we need to do is go by what became known as lunar orbit rendezvous. So you would have a mothership, the command and service module, which would carry a crew of 3 to the air region of the moon and back, and then back to Earth. But the actual landing would only involve the lunar module, which was also carried on that rocket, but was separate, and only 2 of them would go down to the moon. And in a lot of ways, that was much more economical and practical, but it involved separating the crew, landing on the moon, and then doing a rendezvous, you know, 250,000 miles away from the Earth. And when President Kennedy set that goal, the total flight time was Alan Shepard's 15-minute up and down flight. So this was very daunting. But anyway, Hubble famously promoted this and started to persuade NASA that this was the way to go. The first person who had any responsibility in Apollo who came to agree with Hubble was Jim Chamberlain. And what he did, he was already working on Gemini, and he was suggesting, well, why don't we take a Gemini spacecraft and attach it to a big rocket called a Centaur, and then have a little vehicle, which he called the Bug, which would land 1 person on the moon and come back. Now, the higher authorities at NASA basically told him to mind his own business and get back to work on Gemini, which he did. But it got them thinking about some of the benefits of lunar orbit rendezvous. So that's what they that's what they eventually wound up doing. But it took a while to bring people around to this idea, because a lot of people were wedded to the direct landing. Chamberlain was working with Owen Maynard, who we see here, and Maynard actually did some of the very first drawings of what became the lunar module. And when NASA decided to go with lunar orbit rendezvous and the lunar module, Maynard became the head of I think they called it systems integration in the Apollo program, but he was like about maybe the 3rd or 4th highest person in Houston working on Apollo. And a lot of the work on the lunar module then went out to the contractor Grumman Aircraft. So you often hear about the Grumman people who built the lunar module, but Owen was quite involved in it. And anyway, and of course he got to meet some VIPs. Now, one of the things that Owen Maynard is remembered for is that he had to sit down and figure out what is the sequence of missions we're going to have with Apollo once it starts to fly, because you just can't kind of put everything together and launch it and hope that everything works out, you know. So he developed a sequence of flights, which involved, first of all, testing the rockets, the Saturn V rocket, and then the command and service module, and then the lunar module, and then a couple of flights with them together, and finally the landing. It was like A to H with I forget what A was, but H was the lunar landing that we saw on Apollo 11. But you know, sometimes life gets in the way of things, and so of course there were a number of changes that took place in Apollo. You had the Apollo fire that I mentioned. That caused a lot of changes, but Apollo kind of got back on its feet, and and they started back on the A to H sequence that Owen had set up. So they launched Apollo 7, which was the first flight of the command and service module with astronauts on board. And then the plan for the next flight was to launch a test of the command and service module with the lunar module on top of a Saturn V, which had a couple of unmanned or robotic flights um, uh, before Apollo 7. But what happened is that the lunar module wasn't ready yet. It was taking some time to get together because it was quite a different spacecraft from anything that had been done before. So after Apollo 7, they were faced with, if we go by the sequence, we're just going to have to sit around and wait. And the end of the 1960s is approaching rapidly. Um, and also they got word that the Russians were going to be attempting a flight around the moon and perhaps even a landing on the moon. So what they decided is to change things up. So they had a Saturn V, they had a command and service module, and they took the crew of what was supposed to be Apollo 9 and moved them to Apollo 8, which was turned into just a flight where they would go without a lunar module and go around the moon. And the crew, the original crew of Apollo 8, they could have taken that moon flight, but they were so they were so well trained in the lunar module because that was going to be the first flight. They said we want to fly that. So the first flight of the lunar module was moved to Apollo 9. So this is the launch of Apollo 8, and they had to change everything around, and Owen Maynard was quite involved in kind of making all the arrangements for that flight. And of course, that was the Christmas of 1968, and we remember this photo amongst other things from Apollo 8. And that was a very, very dangerous mission. You got to think about it. If Apollo 8 had the same problem as Apollo 13 had, that crew would have died. On Apollo 13, they lost the oxygen tank in the service module, but they were able to use the LEM as a lifeboat. On Apollo 13, if that had happened, there was no lifeboat. That would have been the end of the story. So it was a very dangerous mission, but they carried it off, and we had Apollo 9, which tested the lunar module in Earth orbit, and then they decided they needed one more mission in the vicinity of the moon. There was a big argument about it because, of course, some people said, "Well, let's try the landing now." But they did one more test with Apollo 10, and then we had Apollo 11. But what were the Soviets up to? Well, they built this rocket called the N1, but they started late because when Kennedy said that they were going to the moon, they thought he was bluffing. So they didn't do anything for a couple of years, and then they realized the Americans were serious, so they started to build the N1, and they said, how can we save time? Well, let's not do some of the testing that you would do before you'd attempt to launch. And so they launched the N1, I think 3 or 4 times, and no flight of the N1 lasted more than 2 minutes. They all blew up in the launch phase. Nobody was on board, by the way. They also built a spacecraft similar, using the lunar orbit rendezvous idea. And this was the Soviet lunar module. There was only one cosmonaut who was going to be on that. And that was very dangerous because, you know, if you fell onto your back on the moon and couldn't get up, who was going to help you? You know, in Apollo, you had somebody to help you. So they actually had fitted the cosmonaut with a hula hoop, which was fastened to where the belt buckle is. But if they fell on their back, the hula hoop would stand them up. But they never got to the point where they flew anybody to the moon, but they actually built a couple of these lunar modules. And the setup they had for the landing was very dangerous. If they'd have pulled it off, it would have been the greatest stunt ever pulled off. But this was all kept secret until the fall of the Soviet Union. The Americans knew because they had spy satellites by then going over the pad, so they could see the N1s there, and they could see what happened when they blew up, or at least the effects, if not the actual explosion. But there was a moon race, but as we know, the Americans won that race with Apollo 11. Now, you may not have seen this picture, or you have not seen it very often. This, virtually all the pictures you see from the Apollo moonwalk, or at least the fancy pictures, not the TV pictures or the 16 millimeter film pictures, but these types of pictures all show Buzz Aldrin. This is actually the only picture that has really has Neil Armstrong in it. So this is why I like this picture. Now behind Neil there, you can see one of the legs from the lunar module. The bottom part of the LEM was left behind on the moon, and there was ultimately 6 landings on the moon. Those legs were actually made in Longueuil, Quebec, you know, in the South Shore of Montreal. So that's another bit of Canadian content in the lunar module. So there's 24 of those legs made in Canada that are still standing on the moon. And you also see the American flag there, of course, and you also see kind of it looks like a piece of foil hanging there. That was one of the experiments they took with them, and what it actually did was it collected samples of the solar wind. So you know, because of the Van Allen belts, which protect us from the solar wind, you pretty well have to go to the moon to get samples of the solar wind. So Apollo 11 not only brought back samples of the moon, they brought back samples of the sun. They put out these collectors, which was basically a piece of foil, and then they were just left out while the astronauts were on the moon, and then brought back and then processed, and they were able to get information about the solar wind. And of course, you know, Alan knows a lot about the solar wind because of its ties to Aurora. But anyway, that's a little bit of the some of the things that went on Apollo 11. The person who thought of this experiment was a guy named Johannes Geiss, who is from Switzerland. So the nickname for that experiment, the official name was a solar wind experiment. the unofficial name was the Swiss flag. So there's a bit of trivia from Apollo. So back on Earth, the controlling was going on. This is actually a picture taken in a room right next to the main mission control room when Apollo 11 was on the moon. And in this room, they had management people from all the contractors. So if something went wrong, uh, uh, you had people there who could phone the plant and get right down to what the problem was. So in this room was very busy during Apollo 13, as you can imagine, but this is in Apollo 11, and right in the center is Owen Maynard, who was of course representing NASA, and the fellow in the foreground next to him is Tom Kelly, who is the top guy at Grumman and is sort of was probably most responsible at Grumman for the lunar module. And the fellow with the eye patch was, I've just suddenly forgotten his name, but he was the guy from North American who was in charge of the command and service module. So this was some of the top management, and they just had to go through the door to go into the mission control room, but they usually communicated with the controllers, on their headsets. So as we know, Apollo 11 was successful, and when they came back, they had to go into quarantine on board the recovery ship, the Hornet, and then they went into this trailer, which was flown back to Houston, and then they were in the Lunar Receiving Lab. Now, why do I have this picture here? It's because of the fellow in the orange jumpsuit. He was a guy named Bill Carpentier, who was born in Edmonton, Alberta, actually raised here in Vancouver Island, and then became an aviation medicine specialist and went to work for NASA. So he and a technician were locked into that trailer with the astronauts, and so he was ready to jump into the water if they had an emergency during their recovery, and then he did the first examinations on them once they got into the trailer and said hello to President Nixon, who was welcoming them back. And after the medical exams were over with, there was sort of a lot of lunar dust inside the command module, which was by then attached to the trailer. You can see there's sort of a big plastic tunnel there. So he went in and got some of the lunar samples and was the first person to look at them in a microscope, probably with the astronauts. But he also has another first. He developed an allergy to lunar dust. So he was the first person to become allergic to lunar dust. So back on Earth, there was celebrations when they got onto the recovery ship. And actually, just at the left, next to the flag, you can see a guy smiling, not the one with glasses, but another guy. His name was Rod Rose. He was another one of the Brits from Avro, and he was Chris Kraft's assistant and also helped develop the flight plans. So that was another thing. So Apollo went on, and I can't go through the list of what everybody did, but that's from Avro. But that was some of the highlights. But there were 6 landings on the moon. There would have been 7 if Apollo 13 had made it. And of course, they had in the last 3 missions, they had the lunar roving vehicle. Um, and and for Apollo 16 and Apollo 17, they did some of their training at Sudbury. So this is John Young and Charlie Duke of Apollo 16 training at Sudbury, because the nickel that they have there was created by a gigantic impact, like 1 billion years ago. And they expected that some of the rocks that they found in Sudbury would be similar to what they found in the moon. In fact, it turned out to be more the case than they expected. The Apollo 16 landing site, they chose their landing sites for scientific reasons after, they made the first landing in Apollo 11, and they actually expected to find rocks more of volcanic origin at the Apollo 16 landing site, and they called the plains of Descartes. And what they found was that the regolith and the rocks there were primarily of impact origin. And during the moonwalk, they were one of their moonwalks are saying, "Hey, this place, this rock looks like something we got in Sudbury." So Sudbury was talked about during Apollo 16, and they basically found on Apollo that impacts played a much bigger role in the developing the moon than had been thought. There were certainly volcanic events such as those that created the Mare on the moon, but the impacts played a bigger role. And I would argue that that was part of the chain of events that led to the discovery in the 80s that, for example, the event that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs and a lot of other things was an impact event. And this is just a picture from Apollo 17. The latter moon flights landed in some really spectacular and amazing places. Apollo 11, it was pretty flat, but this was the Taurus Littrow landing site for Apollo 17, and the fellow there is Jack Schmitt, who is the first and so far only geologist who's flown to the moon. And he's still around, by the way. I might even see him in a few weeks at a meeting I'm going to. So Apollo was pretty amazing, and this is just another view of Apollo 11, and you can see the lower part of the LEM that I was talking about before. And also, Buzz there is standing next to a seismometer, which operated for a short period of time. And behind that is a laser reflector, which is actually still in use today. People send laser beams to the moon and bounce back, and they can determine within a few inches the moon's exact distance. And they found that it's moving out from the Earth at a very modest rate, maybe an inch or two every year, something like that. So some of the, a lot of the Avro people left either during or after Apollo 11, or during the Apollo program or after. some of them were involved in the shuttle program, in developing some of the systems. And I just put this in honor of the Brits who formed the NASA cricket team and played one game against a Navy team. We all know about the group of Germans who kind of worked together at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville and built the Saturn V. The Avro people were kind of never really formed a coherent group. Of course, they kind of knew each other, but they were off doing various things. And the only thing close to a group photo that we have is when a bunch of them became American citizens. Actually, most of the people in this photo are the British people. There's a couple of Canadians, and these aren't really the better known ones, except for John Hodge, who I talked about earlier, and Rod Rose, who I showed a couple of slides back. So in 1994, they had this reunion that I talked about, which is where I met them. And there was a little story in the Toronto Star, and they took this picture. So at the front is a guy named Brian Erb holding the LEM model. And Brian, as far as I know, is the only survivor of this group. He's still around. He's actually went to the University of Alberta. And then when he was at NASA, he was in charge of developing the heat shield for Apollo. And also later on was the manager of the Lunar Receiving Lab. And then this fellow here with the more accurate LEM, that's Owen Maynard, who I've talked about. And I got to spend a lot of time with him before he passed on in 2001. And he was quite a character. And then back here is a guy named Stan Galazowski who didn't actually stick around that long. When they moved to Houston in 1962, he decided to leave, and but he actually wound up becoming quite wealthy because he became one of the first franchisees for Canadian Tire. And so when I met him, he had his home near Windsor, Ontario, I think, but he also had another home in the Bahamas. When he was working for NASA, he was one of the computer experts. This guy right here in the middle also left in 1962. The idea of moving to Houston did not appeal to him. But he came back and basically became one of the great pioneers of the Canadian space program, Bruce Aikenhead. He worked for a couple of contractors, but was involved with early Canadian satellites with these contractors, and then went to work for the National Research Council, and then when the Canadian Space Agency was set up in 1969, he went with them. And when he retired, he was in charge of the Canadian astronaut program, and he became a very good friend of mine. He retired to the interior of BC, but his daughter lives about a mile away from me, so he was always be visiting, and and he was a great pioneer of the Canadian space program. Actually, and so was Brian Erb. After he worked in the Lunar Receiving Lab, he retired from NASA, and then the Canadian Space Agency hired him as their guy in Houston, and he was quite involved in developing the space station, our role in the space station. And then on the right side here at the top was a guy named Dave Ewart, one of the Brits who represented NASA at the various plants. And then this bald fellow at the right, there's a guy named Dr. Owen Coons, and he was a physician in the RCAF, but then was hired by NASA, and he was basically the one of the doctors, along with Bill Carpentier, the guy in Apollo 11, who treated the astronauts in the early days of the program. And when he was with the RCAF, he was actually involved in the Aero program in sort of helping to develop some of the human factors in that aircraft. So he was an interesting character, and I actually met him when I was 10 years old, but that's kind of another story. And then met him years later at that reunion. So anyway, I mentioned that Bruce Aikenhead was involved in selecting these people, our astronauts, and I mentioned how Brian Erb was involved in the space program. This is Chris Hadfield. Actually, 25 years ago, and about 2 weeks ago, was when this picture was taken, when the Canadarm2 was installed on the space station, and he was involved with that. And then years later, he came back to the space station as the commander. So I eventually wrote this book, Arrows to the Moon, and my friend Bob Thirsk, one of those Canadian astronauts, took it into space and on the ISS. And I asked him how it was received on the ISS, and he said nobody could put it down. So actually, I made up that story, but I told Bob about it, and he immediately tweeted it. So he actually did say it, but that's not exactly how things turned out. But he did get everybody who was on the station at the time to sign it, and I have it here with me. So that's basically the story. These are a couple of my books, and also as a result of, or I later became involved with the Avro Aero stamp. I was an advisor to Canada Post when they put out that stamp, which a lot of Aero fans have been waiting for. So that's my talk. I hope I didn't go too long, but
no, it was very thorough. We thank you for that. Got a really good sense of the history of how Canada really was involved in the space race. Are there any questions here in the room or out there in Zoom land for Chris? Yes, we've got one in the room. So I'm going to hand you the mic.
Thank you for the talk. Can you hear me okay?
yes.
There's the camera. I was wondering about the concept of, I understand that the lunar lander used a computer in between the joystick inputs from the pilot or the commander and the actual thrusters and such, so that they weren't directly flying it. And that was something that was pioneered uh, in the Avro Arrow. Do you have some background on that fly-by-wire system? Thanks.
Um, yes. So the Avro Arrow, um, that was perhaps one of its biggest advances over anything else. It had a fly-by-wire system, which was basically uh, instead of an entirely manual system or an entirely computer-driven system, the fly-by-wire um, uh, um, was basically assisting the pilot. It was still the pilot flying it. I'm not sure how much of a direct relationship there was between the system on the Arrow uh, to the lunar module, because they had how the inputs worked on the lunar module. I actually know that a little better than saying how it functioned on the Arrow. But if you ever look at the lunar module, and you'll see on the window on the windows, especially the commander's window, it had kind of a reticle on it with kind of marks on it and little numbers on it. The next time you see that, take a look for it. And so the output, one of the outputs from the computer was that it would spit out a number. So let's say the number was 40. I'm just guessing, and you would during the descent, you would hear the lunar module pilot, who actually wasn't really piloting, he was the commander. Um, they would they would be giving out numbers, and so if say Buzz said 40, and Neil would be looking uh, towards the landing site through this reticle, and he would look at next to the mark in 40. And he knew that's where he was being taken. That's how he knew where he was going. And in his case, he knew that it was going to take it into inside a crater that had a lot of rocks in it. So that's when he took manual control and flew over that crater and landed. That's how that worked. And um, I think the setup on the Arrow would have been different because you have different functions on it. The lander, you're basically mainly using it to land, and the Arrow, you're doing all sorts of things, and they didn't have all the weight constraints that you had on the LEM.
Okay. Apparently there is a question from Zoomland, so please go ahead.
Yes.
Oh, do you know what the plans were for Apollo 18 and 19, and was there an Apollo 20 planned? I thought landing sites had been selected for all the best, or for all the last missions that never flew.
Yes. So yes, there was. Um, they were planning to go all the way to 20, and the landing site process was kind of a dynamic one because they had to change it not only when flights were canceled, but also, for example, Apollo 13 was supposed to land at Fra Mauro, and that site was such a priority that they landed Apollo 14 there, and then they had to think about some of the other places, especially. So Apollo 20 was canceled very early on, and they decided to, I think they diverted the booster rocket from that to Skylab. Um, and um, and there was a couple of things going on there. First of all, uh, NASA was being cut back quite quite severely, um, in part because of various pressures from social programs, but probably more importantly, the Vietnam War. Uh, Also, there were a lot of people who were really nervous about Apollo because they knew how dangerous it was. And they got a pretty good reminder of that during Apollo 13. And so um, uh, they uh, not everybody at NASA was unhappy when these things were canceled, but uh, uh, Apollo 18 and 19 were canceled, and I think mainly for budgetary reasons. But interestingly enough, President Nixon was also very nervous about it because he was afraid that if an Apollo failed and there were the astronauts died and things like that at an inconvenient time politically, um, then it might affect his reelection prospects. Um, so there was a bit of a compromise on that one. They didn't fly Apollo 13 until after, or sorry, Apollo 17 until after the 1972 election. So yeah, that's a very interesting story. But of course, there were uh, some astronauts who probably knew they would have gotten those moon flights, so they were a little sore about it. It also affected Apollo 17 because the third member of the Apollo 17 crew was a guy named Joe Engle, who was actually bounced off the crew because when there was no more 18 and 19, the scientists lobbied to have Harrison Schmitt put on the last crew. So Joe Engle had to wait until the shuttle program before he got to fly. And Harrison Schmitt went to the moon and did quite a good job because he although when he became an astronaut he wasn't a pilot, he became one, and a good one.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Chris, for attending. I know you had to get up early this morning out in the east or west coast, rather, in order to participate in today's session. I really thank you for that. And I think we got a really good appreciation of how Canada participated in the space race and through all the programs, not just the Avro Arrow. So it's very wonderful. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks. It's great seeing you. I hope it's not too long before we meet in person. And of course, when we think about Jeremy Hansen, going to the moon, I think we can say that we have a bit of heritage in in flying to the moon. I was sorry that there wasn't a bit more publicity about that during his flight, but anyway, there you go. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we'll break for 15 and come back. All right. Okay, well, welcome back. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I've been tasked with bringing you news from the board this month, so some of it, oh, I forgot one thing. Hang on. Thanks. One of the things I wanted to bring to people's attention before I talk about news from the board was an email we received from a gentleman by the name of Tom Calderwood, and he leads the Photoelectric Photometry, or PEP, group of the American Association of Variable Star Observers. They're building up a long-term project on Alpha Cygni variables, and he wants very much to add an observer from Nova Scotia. This is an opportunity for amateurs to participate in a professionally guided research project, and he did attach a quick introduction to the program and a proceedings paper from the last AAVSO meeting. He'd be glad to provide more information and to answer some questions. So what we're asking now of our membership, if there is anyone that's interested in this, please let us know and we will put you in touch with this gentleman. It sounds like a really intriguing program, and it's a research project that is being done through many locations, and he certainly has asked for response from Nova Scotia. It's really good if someone from the center would be interested. Please let us know. Okay, now on to the fun stuff, news from the board. Let's see if I can get this going.
The other one.
Other one?
Down.
Down. Oh, okay, great. All right, first and foremost, the Scope Fund. As many of you know, this was a fund set up in memory of our former member, David Lane. And it is a fund that is set up so that it is intended for the maintenance and upkeep of our observatory, the St. Croix Observatory. It is a protected fund, so the center cannot use it except for the sole purpose of working on SCO and its improvements. If you'd like to donate, please do so. We welcome it anytime, any amount. And to do so, if you go to our homepage on the right-hand column there under News, you'll see a link in which you can participate in that fund. I think we have 25,170. Greg is nodding his head, so I'm assuming that's correct. So we can certainly build on it. And we have certainly Michelle Lane and Tony Schellink Michelle for initiating it, Tony for certainly contributing in great amount, and to our many donors who have contributed as well. The astrophoto sale that we have going. There are now photos available for sale. There are 3 contributors, Blair McDonald, Jerry Kuzab, and Jerry Black. All funding or all proceeds to this do go to the Scope Fund. So please have a look online to find the photos and to purchase one of them. Again, it's under the News, and it's just above the link where you contribute to the Scope Fund. Okay? So please have a go there. From time to time, those images do change, so there will be changes. And this is something that will be ongoing for years to come, hopefully. Nova Notes. Many, many thanks to Lisa Ann Fanning and to John McPhee for the work that they put into this particular product. The cover that you see there is from David Hoskin. It's the partial lunar eclipse that was held on, it was held on March 3rd. And of course, Mary Lou's sketch of SCO that she contributed years ago when we were first getting funds for SCO. There's a beautiful photo in there of SCO in the snow, and of course the astrophotography and the usual culprits of the messages from the editor and president. And Matt Payne, one of our members from Massachusetts, has an article on amateur astronomy meets radio AMSAT. Jerry Black has a comparison of sea star images. Paul Heath has his poem in there. And Dave Chapman, I'm not sure if you'd want to call it a poem so much as an ode to Comet Hyakutake from 1996. And of course, the Members Universe, the puzzle, and whatnot. Well worth the read and taking the time to do so. Dark Sky Weekend is the weekend of August 7 to 9. It's held at Kajim-Kujuk National Park, and we do that in, can I use the phrase, in partnership with them? The park is basically the host, and we provide some of the volunteers that are involved in observing sessions, both the daytime solar and the evening observing sessions. So mark your calendars for the date, okay, for August 7 to 9. And if you forget it, don't forget it's in the calendar and it's in the OH too, so you can find it in both locations. And if you would like to volunteer, which you hope you will, please contact either Peter Hurley or Tony Schellink, and they'd be more than happy to add you to the roster of volunteers. Novi Star Party. Look what we have in the upper left corner. For the first time ever, thanks to the suggestion of the team and to the design efforts of Mike Gatto, we have a Nova East logo. This is something that will be used, well, we hope for in perpetuity, but for at least a very long time, so that every year you will see that, and when you see that logo, you know that it's our event. This is the first time ever we've had a designated Nova East logo. You'll see it on our new t-shirts, and while he's in the room, I'll thank Frank. You haven't seen the design yet, but you will shortly. But Frank Logan has designed the t-shirt for us this year, and I think you'll be really happy with what he's produced too. But we'll divulge that at the next meeting. The theme is the sky from near to far. The dates were extended. They are from August 12 to 16, which is a Wednesday, I believe, to Sunday morning, basically. The rationale being is that overnight on the 12th and 13th is the Perseid meteor shower, and Paul Gray will be telling us on the evening of the 12th how to observe and report the Perseids that we see, and he'll provide some reports that he will, once he's collected them after this, we've done all our observing, assuming the skies are clear, fingers crossed, he will then submit them. So keep that in mind. And of course, we haven't got the agenda fully developed yet, but it's darn close. So you'll be hearing more of that again in June. One of the things we want, as you know, as part of Nova East, typically we have the sky tour, which is pointing out the constellations and some very bright stars and the sky lore associated with them. From there, the public go to the binocular table, and they are pointed to various objects within the sky, and then they're shunted over to the telescopes. And we had designated 4 or 5 telescopes in the field to show specific objects. There are 5 objects that we will be identifying that you will see in the sky tour, at the binocular table, and at the telescope, so that the public gets to see the same object from 3 different perspectives: naked eye, with binoculars, and then, of course, with the telescopes. One of the challenges, of course, is where are the telescopes? If they're scattered across the whole field, people don't recognize where they are. So we decided that one of the things we would do is that we'd designate those 5 sites 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, on the observing field for those individuals who would be willing to use their scope as part of this exercise. So we need volunteers. If people know that they are definitively coming to Nova East, we would like to hear from you. If not, we'll approach some people when we get there. But right now, we know that there are 3 people that have volunteered, so 3 of those 5 sites are taken so far. But we still would like more. And if we get more, if we get 3 people, that's all the better. We can extend that designation field a little bit for that to happen. The other piece of the puzzle that we need your assistance with is the binocular table. As you can appreciate, Tony Schellink has been doing this for years and has been doing such a fabulous job that, and he wants to retire from that role. So one of the things we suggested was, okay, well, it's really a whole lot for one person to take on. So what we decided to do was we were going to take a cadre of volunteers, myself included, and I think Chris Young has volunteered as well. But we would like maybe 2 other people that would be willing to be quote-unquote trained on how to do this. In essence, what we would be doing would be divide and conquer. So we would be taking 2 or 3 objects each, learning where they are, how to find them, point to them, and describe them. You know, what is it? How old is it? What does it comprise of? That sort of thing. So we would like a couple of volunteers to assist us with that. If anyone is interested in assisting with that, please let me know. Contact me. And because what we want to do is, once the weather gets just a little bit more warmer towards the end of the month, in May and June, get together a couple of nights with just maybe some friends with us and go through this. So we have a couple of practice sessions so that we know what we're doing and who's doing what. And if we screw up on session 1, at least we know how we can fix it for session 2 and 4. And keep in mind that these folks would be used not only for Nova East, but they could potentially be used as well for the DSW. Okay. So any assistance you could lend us would be greatly appreciated. As you know, the national entity has several awards that people can make recommended or nominations for. All you have to do is go online to find out what the criteria are for these various awards. So go online and read what they're about. And if you can think of a member of our center that should be awarded that, suggest a nomination for them. And you only have 237 days left to apply. The observing certificates. These, as you know, I feel like a broken record on this, but the visual observing, for instance, the Explore the Universe is there, and I've circled it. Because out of all the programs, this is the only program in which anybody, anywhere can apply. You do not have to be a member to apply for this one. It's there for the uploading, and all you have to do is find, if you're not a member, find someone who is a member that can verify your logbook, and you'll get the certificate and pin. Okay, so for the Explore the Universe, there are 110 objects that you can see. Basically, you have to see 50% of the planets, the specific stars, the constellations, or you can do the whole shooting match like I did. I mean, it's up to you, but you need to complete at least 55 of them. And I do have the Explore the Universe book with me here today that if anybody wants to see it, they come see me after the meeting. I can show it to you. With respect to Explore the Moon, there are 2 programs there. One is the binocular, which has 40 objects that you need to find, and the telescope has 94. And I don't think there's an option really to, I think those are, you do have to complete those. Right. Oops, sorry, let's go back. Before this, the numbers that you see there in yellow to the right-hand side of those other ones, those are the numbers of objects of each of those various programs that are there. You'll note that the Deep Sky Challenge only has 45, whereas the others have 110 or more. That is because it truly is a challenge. They are very difficult to find, and so not many people have completed that one. So if you've figured that you've seen everything else, this would be a challenge for you, and it truly is. With the astro imaging, this is one that I know I've been teasing the astro imagers in the club to why aren't you applying for these certificates? Because I know you've got the images to submit, but they are certainly there. The wide field requires 15 of 22 possibilities. The deep sky has 12 pictures, 2 per category of the 6 categories. And of course, the astro imaging solar system, 8 are required. I think a couple of people here have certainly completed some of these. David, I think you have solar?
I've done them all.
Okay. Yes, Tony Schelling. Yeah, so we have 2 that have done everything. So talk to them if you need a mentor.
Yeah, and for the wide field, you could do it with a smartphone.
There you go. So if you got a smartphone, away you go. The GA wasn't as well attended as we would have liked, but I'm hoping that you did see the notice that went out on May 1st to welcome Sandhya Mailatula, our brand new executive director. Got to meet her briefly through the GA. She's a wonderful person, and I know she's going to be a great asset to the organization. You can see what her background is here. So it fits in very, very well with what we want to accomplish. Also, the RASC annual meeting, you might know it better as the AGM, but they took out the G now. It's just the annual meeting. And it's Sunday, June 21st. There isn't any information about how to register yet, but please keep your eye open in the weekly and the monthly reports, because they'll tell you how to register for it. Again, another item to mark your calendar. It's another Sunday. I guess I just want to say about this is that we're all members of the society, and as such, we all have a voice. And this is one of the places where that voice can be heard. So it's really important that we as members attend. So I'm hoping that you can be there for that. They aren't several hours long either, folks. It's relatively short. So it is important that you attend. Ask questions. With respect to the governance, we do have a center board of directors, and some of us are here. I'm Judy Black, the secretary. Dave Hoskin, who is our MC, he is one of our directors. Frank Logan is here as a director. Peter Hurley is our vice president. David McMullen is one of our directors. Matt Dyer. And Greg Dill is our treasurer. So quite a few of us are here. If there is anything that you feel our center should be addressing or could address better, please contact any one of us. You can go to the Contact Us, and our general emails are there. Or if you know us, certainly give us a shout. The National Council, its next meeting is June 14, 1 week before the annual meeting. I'm currently the chair of that entity. And just to give you a brief description for those that aren't familiar with what the National Council does, it has representatives from each of the 30 centers across the country, soon to be 31, we hope. And there's one rep per 200 members within that center. So our center has about 150, 170 thereabouts. So we only have one rep, which is c'est moi for now. Its purpose is to, in essence, be the conduit, for lack of a better phrase, between the centers and the board. So that we are advising, I don't want to say advising the board, but that in essence what we do. We're discussing with the board issues that we have as a society. So that maybe this isn't the best descriptor, but the ivory tower is hearing from the boots on the ground. Okay, so that they know what's happening out there. Not to say, because all these guys and gals on the board are members of centers, but they don't know what the rest of the country is feeling. And this gives them that opportunity to hear what could and should be done. And I think with the redefinition of the role of the National Council, that is working really, really well now. So if you feel there's anything that should be brought up to the national table at this level, please contact me and let me know. Our public meetings, on June 6th is our next one, and we have 2 sets of speakers. We haven't heard yet who is going to be addressing the Starfinder, the David Lane Astronomy Outreach Program at St. Mary's. But Michelle Lane, Tiffany Field, and I believe Ben O'Toole, one of the teachers that is involved in this program, may be participating in that, but we're not certain on that. Hasn't been confirmed. And Tony Schellink is going to give us a better understanding. Remember me describing about the sky tour to the binocular to the telescope. This came out of discussions that he and I and Peter Hurley had following last year's event, and how we could formalize this and perhaps create a what's the word I want? A template for future events to take place. He's giving us the presentation he gave to Montreal Centre, which was very well received there. The September 12 and 13, September 12, October 3rd is still open. November 7, Blair MacDonald is going to be talking to us about finding exoplanets. And for December at our AGM, John Badowski is going to be describing the Fermi paradox, which would be kind of exciting to hear about. So again, please mark your calendars for those dates. And here's something that the board discussed at their last meeting this past week that we would like to put forward to the membership to consider and give us input. One of the things that we've determined is that we know the number of members that we have in our center, but less than half attend meetings, either here in the room or via Zoom. And so we're trying to figure out a way to get people meeting each other. We want to put the meet back in meeting. So one of the things that came across our desk, thanks to a suggestion at National Council from Edmonton Centre, was their group decided that at least 3 meetings a year, they were going to have their speaker to start, but then after that, all the other business of the center was out the window, and they would have an extended cookie and coffee in which the crowd in the room could then get together and say, okay, well, I want to talk about, maybe David wants some input about some EPO, so we'll have a group of people who are interested in that, or visual observing, or sketching, or what about getting a group of women together? So all those sorts of things we can decide. Is that concept of having a speaker and then the rest of it open for us to literally be in this room and to actually, heaven forbid, talk to each other? We haven't looked at how to involve the people out in Zoom land, but certainly our hope is that for those in Zoom land that are here close by will in fact come to the room and participate with us. So we would really appreciate your input on this. So if you could let us know what you think about it or how you see this coming to fruition for our center, be really, really welcomed. And so see you in June. Of course, there's the calendar just as a reminder. June 2nd is our board meeting. June 6th is the center meeting. The 14th is the National Council, and the 21st is the annual meeting. So please do register for the annual meeting. Come see us on June 6th again, and please don't forget to look up. The skies are open.
Okay, so what's up in the May sky? Before I go through this, I just want to urge people that if there's a clear night and you're not observing yourself or imaging, take a telescope out on the front lawn and get your neighbors to have a look at the moon or Jupiter. You'd be amazed at how appreciative people are. Peter Hurley and Frank Logan and I set up some telescopes a couple weeks ago at Harry DeWolf Park, and unannounced, but we had about 10-15 people have a look through them, and it's really something to see how excited the children get when they see the moon through an eyepiece for the first time. So keep that in mind. It used to be called sidewalk astronomy. We can call it pop-up or front yard astronomy, but it's a lot of fun. Okay, so the night sky. Okay, well, nights are short. By the end of the month, we'll have only 4 hours of darkness. So you have to be willing to stay up late to observe in the darkness or image. Having said that, I mean, the moon you can look at in daylight, so easy to do.
I was just going to say that, but you beat me to it.
And the planets, Venus and Jupiter, are well set up for observing, and they're bright enough that just after sunset you'll be able to see them. What else? This is the sun today. There's a number of sunspots in an Earth-facing position, but just to draw your attention to this one, which is just rotating into view. So far it's been a very active sunspot, and it's produced a number of solar flares, most recent being a very strong M class. So we may get some aurora activity out of this one. I was reading that there's talk about a fourth class of solar flares designated an S class, so for super flare. And this is as a result of studying the records of solar flares over the last decades. And it seems we're overdue for one of these S-class, stronger than X-class flares. So something to think about. This is the moon for this month, phases of the moon. And we started the month with a full moon. And we'll end the month with a full moon. So you're aware of the saying, once in a blue moon? Well, that's where it came from. The second moon in a full moon in a month is called the blue moon. So, and we have a new moon on the 16th. So a little more detail on the moon. Let's see, we're into ninth. So today it's last quarter. So if you were up early, you would have seen the last quarter moon rising. And the Eta Equarids meteor shower peaked a couple days ago, but you might still see a few of those. On the 14th, the moon is nicely situated. It'll be a waning crescent moon, and it's situated between Saturn and Mars. The new moon for the 16th will be Frog's croaking moon. And on the 18th, there's a conjunction of the moon with Venus. The moon will be near Jupiter on the 19th and 20th, near Messier 44, the Beehive cluster, on the 21st, near Regulus on the 22nd, and then we go to the first quarter of the Frog's croaking moon on the 23rd, and we'll end the month with the moon being near Antares and Messier 4, which is how the month started. So if you miss seeing it at the start of the month, you can get to see it at the end of the month. And this is what it'll look like, pretty much. So this is what it looked like on the 4th, an almost full moon, Antares, nice bright red giant, and the crab globular cluster, Messier 4, all in the same field of view of 15 by 70 binoculars. And on the 14th, if we have a nice clear morning, and this is a challenge because it's an early morning challenge. You have to get up at 5, and you need a very good eastern horizon, but you'll be able to see Mars quite low, Saturn, and right in the middle, a nice waning crescent moon. So that should be quite the sight. This is the conjunction of the waxing crescent moon and Venus on the 18th of May at 9:30 p.m. So you don't have to stay up late. Should look be a nice nice contrast, the thin crescent and very bright Venus. It'd be a good photo opportunity as well. And then on the 21st, we have the waxing crescent moon and the beehive cluster in the same field of view. And what's nice here is that the moon will be at a phase where it's going to be overpowering, so the stars of the beehive cluster should still stand out quite nicely. As always, these are your targets, lunar targets for if you're completing the Explore the Universe program. And the best time to view most of these targets will be between the evening between May 21st and the 25th after sunset, when the terminator will give you the best contrast in this area of the moon. This month, you'll also have a chance to see the lunar X and the lunar V. This is what's known as the clair-obscur effect. And it's the X is formed by sunlight hitting the rims of three craters, Lacaille, Bianchitas, and Purbeck. And the V is formed by the sunlight, rising sun hitting the tops of the crater Urquhart. Now, if you've seen the lunar X and the lunar V, you'll have to, this you can see during the daytime, so sun won't be set yet, but you'll be able to make these two objects out at around 7:44 p.m. on the 23rd. But if you have seen the X and the V, I challenge you to look for the Curtis Cross. Mike Bochat mentioned this a while ago, and I came across it while looking for the dates for the lunar X and the V. So this is a challenge because you have to look at the moon just after last quarter. So actually this morning, around 3:30 would have been the time. But anytime the moon's in the last quarter, so in June, keep this in mind. It's located between these two craters, Gambart and Perry. And here's the Curtis Cross. It looks more like a Maltese cross. And it's a bit of a challenge, not only because of the time that you have to be up to observe this, but I haven't seen, this is one of the few images I've seen on the web of this particular phenomenon. And this was an image posted a number of years ago on Cloudy Nights by Dana T. I don't recall. It was right. Okay. So the planets this month. Mercury's too close to the sun until well into the month, and then it'll be very low in the northwest just after sunset. So you'll need a really good western horizon to see Mercury after the 21st of May. Venus is prominent in the west, a conjunction with the waxing crescent moon on the 18th, and near M35 on the 20th. And kind of a future attraction, there'll be a conjunction in early June between Venus and Jupiter. So that two brightest planets currently in our sky. So that'll be pretty nice to see. Mars is now visible very low in the east before dawn. Jupiter is visible low in the west after sunset, but it gets lower and lower. as the month progresses, and near the waxing crescent moon on the 19th and the 20th. Saturn, very low in the east in the pre-dawn sky, so you have to get up early to see Saturn. As I mentioned, near the waning crescent moon on the 13th and the 14th. Uranus too close to the sun to be visible currently, although it was still visible near at the start of the month. And Neptune is visible low in the east in the pre-dawn sky. So we have two brightest planets, Venus and Jupiter, visible in the evening sky, and Mars, Saturn, and Neptune in the early morning sky. And this is what Venus will look like in 15 by 70 binoculars when it is close to the to Messier 2035, the shoe buckle cluster, which is a really nice open cluster. So that would be another nice photo opportunity. I believe Venus is in a gibbous phase. So have a look for this on the 20th if it's clear at 9:45. You don't have to stay up very late, and it should be quite pretty. Spring constellations. Next month we'll move into the summer constellations. So, our spring constellations are Ursa Minor, Ursa Major, Bootes, Leo, Virgo, and Libra. So there's 6 of the 12 for the necessary for Explore the Universe. And the stars, the bright stars that go with those constellations, Arcturus, Spica, Regulus, Dubhe, Polaris, Denebola, Zubin el-Janubi, and Zubin-esh Shemali in Libra. So those are the bright stars that you have to identify in the constellations when you're recording them for Explore the Universe. And the deep sky object for this month is Messier 5. This is an ancient, very densely populated globular cluster in Serpens. And you see it right here. Okay, so just below Arcturus. Once it's getting dark, around 10 o'clock, it should be Messier 5 should be well placed for observing. Double and multiple stars. So this is an easy one for this month. It's a double star, an optical double in Leo, consisting of Adhaphera or Zeta Leonis and 35 Leonis. They're easy to separate with binoculars. Quite a wide separation of almost 326 arc seconds. Adhaphera comes from the Arabic, the braid or curl, and it refers to the location of this double star in the lion's mane. And these two stars, Adhaphera and 35 Leonis, are 174 light years from each other. So this is simply an optical double. The stars happen to line up as a double, but they're not gravitationally linked at all. And the Eta Aquarid meteor shower, as I said, it peaked a few days ago, but there still might be a few stray meteors to have a look at. And we have a new supernova. This is supernova 2026 KID, which was discovered on the 22nd of April. And it's in a galaxy in Draco, and this is the galaxy. It's the known as the Splinter Galaxy or the Knife Edge Galaxy. It's NGC 1507. I imaged it with a 6-inch reflector, but I've seen images taken with the C-Star 50 and the C-Star 30 and the Dwarf. So it's a pretty easy one to find, and it's you don't have to stay up really late to take some pictures of it. Okay, its magnitude's 15.6. So if you're trying to find this visually, you're going to need at least 10 inches of aperture. But if you've got a 10-inch Dob, might be fun to see if you can visually locate this particular supernova.
Roughly, which are the cardinal directions?
It's going to be in the northeast. Have a look on Stellarium. I'll point it out to you. And that's it for the May sky. Any questions? Okay, if not, everyone have a good rest of the day. Enjoy the sunshine, and see you next month.
Don't forget to wish your mothers Happy Mother's Day.
Please hang up and try again.